You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where we dive into all things Warhammer Age of Sigmar, from the endless wars of the mortal realms to the stories, strategies, and armies that bring them to life. I'm your host Grizzly, and today we're descending into the shadows to talk about one of the most complex and captivating figures in all of Warhammer, Morathi, the Shadow Queen, and the goddess behind the Daughters of Khaine. Morathi's story isn't one of just simple villainy or divine favor. It's one of ambition. She's been weaving her schemes since before the mortal realms even existed. A survivor of the world that was, she escaped into Azir alongside Sigmar after the fall of Chaos, using her charm, her power, and her manipulation to carve out a new place for herself. But where Sigmar sought to rebuild, Morathi sought to rule. For centuries, she played her part of the faithful ally, the advisor, the prophet, the powerful sorceress who claimed to speak for the long-dead god Khaine. But the truth was far darker. The Daughters of Khaine weren't born from divine revelation. They were born from Morathi's obsession. She twisted the legend of Khaine to build a cult that worshipped her, fueled by blood and shadow. And when the time came, she struck. In the events of Broken Realms Morathi, she betrayed Sigmar, deceived Teclis, and turned her own people into a weapon to seize godhood for herself. What emerged was not just Morathi reborn, but Morathi-Khaine, the embodiment of both goddess and monster, forever divided between beauty and horror. The Daughters of Khaine are her legacy. Armies of fanatical warriors, serpentine priestesses, and blood-soaked zealots who see battle as divine ritual. To them, slaughter is worship, and every drop spilled is an offering to their goddess. In this episode, we're going to explore how Morathi lies became legend, how her cult thrives in the shadows of the mortal realms, and what makes the Daughters of Khaine one of the most dangerous and alluring factions in Age of Sigmar. So sharpen your blades, ready your cauldrons, and let's spill some blood for Khaine. To understand the Daughters of Khaine, we first have to understand Morathi. And to understand Morathi, we have to go back long before the Age of Sigmar, back to the world that was. Morathi was once the queen of the Aelves of Ulthuan, mother of Malorian and the Shadow God, and one of the most powerful sorceresses to ever live. Her cunning and ambition were legendary even then. And when chaos consumed the world, Morathi refused to die with it. Through sheer will and dark sorcery, she escaped into the mortal realms, reshaping her body and soul to survive. In the New Age, she found refuge in Azir, Sigmar's shining realm, and at first played the role of a loyal ally. Sigmar sought to rebuild civilization, to unite gods and mortals under his banner, and Morathi offered her aid as a priestess of Khaine, the god of murder and war from the old world. She claimed Khaine was still alive through her visions, and that she could lead the faithful in his name. But Morathi's faith was a facade. Her worship of Khaine was less devotion and more manipulation, a tool to gather power and followers while Sigmar's gaze was elsewhere. She built temples in secret, gathered Aelves who longed for purpose, and shaped them into her own image, the Daughters of Khaine, deadly, graceful, and utterly devoted to their queen. From these temples came three sacred castes: the Witch Aelves, her frenzied warriors reveling in bloodshed and ritual combat; the Melusai, serpentine demigoddesses created from fragments of Morathi's own essence; and the Kinerai, winged assassins who strike from above with divine precision. Almost every follower of Khaine is a female. Chosen, reshaped, and reborn under Morathi's image, the Daughters of Khaine see their femininity as sacred, a symbol of divine wrath and purity. The few males within their ranks, the Doomfire Warlocks, serve a very different purpose. Cursed with visions and consumed by Morathi's sorcery, they are both her spies and her sacrifices, tolerated only because they channeled the Doomfire's burning magic to serve her will. Their existence is a reminder that in the cult of Khaine, every soul has a place, but no one stands equal to Morathi. Each caste is more than a warrior order. They are manifestations of Morathi's lies, given form. The Melusai and the Kinarai, in particularly, were proof of her mastery over forbidden magic, the power to reshape souls, an art stolen from Nagash himself, twisting shadows and blood into life. Her deception reached its peak in the events of Broken Realms Morathi. She launched a coordinated strike against the mortal realms, an invasion of Anvilgard, one of Sigmar's key strongholds, and a secret ritual deep within Olgu, the realm of shadows. Her goal wasn't conquest, it was ascension. By channeling the bloodshed of her armies and harnessing the divine essence of both Khaine and Slaanesh, she achieved the impossible, apotheosis. But the transformation didn't come without a cost. Her soul was torn into two, splitting it into Morathi-Khaine, the radiant goddess, the public face of her divinity, beautiful, powerful, and worshipped as the new avatar of Khaine. And then the Shadow Queen, her monstrous true form, a massive winged serpent, embodying her vanity, wrath, and corruption. These two beings are inseparable. One could not die without the other. Together, they became both goddess and monster. Truth and lie made one. Anvilgard fell, reborn as Har-Kuran, the city of shadow and blood. Sigmar's outrage echoed across Azir, but Morathi no longer cared. She had carved out her dominion and taken place among the gods, not through faith, but through deceit, sacrifice, and will. But her story doesn't end there. As her influence grew, new figures began to rise within her ranks. One of the most mysterious is Krathusa, the mother of nightmares. Krathusa is a Melusai unlike any other, a prophetess touched by shadow magic, gifted with terrible visions. Some claim she's Morathi's chosen seer. Other whispers she's something far more dangerous, a rival born from Morathi's own stolen power. Her emergence marks a turning point for the Daughters of Khaine. As splinter cults begin to form across the realms, where Morathi's faith is built on lies and manipulation, Krathusa's growing influence hints at rebellion. The idea that maybe, just maybe, the Shadow Queen's power can be taken, not just served. And that's what makes the Daughters of Khaine so fascinating. They're not just another army of zealots. They're a reflection of Morathi herself. Beautiful, deadly, and is always one step away from betrayal. I've always loved how Morathi's story blurs the line between villain and visionary. She's not just a goddess of deceit. She's a survivor in a world built on broken promises. Every victory she wins costs her something. Her allies, her humanity, even her soul. And yet, she always comes out on top. In a universe full of gods and monsters, she's the one that reminds us that ambition can be its very own kind of divinity. If there's one thing the Daughters of Khaine prove, it's that elegance and savagery aren't just opposites. They're two sides of the same blade. On the tabletop and at the hobby desk, this army is a painter's dream and a perfectionist test all in one. Their aesthetic is unmistakable, a blend of elven grace and raw violence. Smooth skin tones contrast with jagged blades and ritual scars, while blood-red cloth and dark armor evoke both ritual purity and divine wrath. Every model feels like a mix of beauty and blasphemy, and that's exactly what makes them so captivating. At the center of all of it is Morathi herself. One of the most ambitious model kits in the entire Age of Sigmar range, her dual form, Morathi-Khaine, and the Shadow Queen, captures her story perfectly. You've got the regal goddess draped in divine authority, and right beside her, the monstrous serpent form coiling in rage and power. Painting the two side by side feels like painting a single soul split in half. The army around her follows the same design language. The witch elves are dynamic and fluid, their poses full of motion, hair and blades whipping through the air like a dance. They're models that look alive, and they reward painters who love detail, from the gleam of metal to the shimmer of blood effects on their blades. Then you have the Melusai, who feel like the physical embodiment of Morathi's corruption. Half elf, half serpent, they're sleek and unsettling, with their armor designs give you room to experiment with lighting, reflections, and texture. The Blood Sisters and the Blood Stalkers are some of the most striking infantry in the game. Dangerous, elegance given form. The Kinarai add the high fantasy flair. Winged and poised mid-flight, they're sculpted with so much movement that they almost look like they're frozen mid-ritual. Their wings alone are playgrounds for painters, veins, gradients, and shadow tones that can make them look either ethereal or demonic depending on your palette. And then there's the Cauldron of Blood, one of the most iconic centerpiece kits Games Workshop has ever produced. It's not just a model, it's a story on a base. You've got the bubbling cauldron, the witch elves surrounding it, the avatar of Khaine looming above, all representing the cycle of sacrifice and worship that defines this faction. It's brutal, it's beautiful, and it demands attention on the table. Most Daughters of Khaine armies share a unified palette. Deep reds, black armor, pale skin. But there's plenty of room for creativity. Some painters lean into the ritualistic theme of blood splattered across altars and rusted metals, while others treat them almost like divine angels of death, with luminous skin tones and polished bronze. You can go full classic with Hagnar's crimson and gold, or something moodier like Keltnar's shadowed purples and silvers. What makes them special as a hobby army is that they tell their story through contrast, light and dark, grace and fury, order and chaos. Every model feels like it's one heartbeat away from an ecstasy or a rage, and that's something that no other army really captures. If you love textures, motion, and the challenge of painting something that's equal parts divine and dangerous, the Daughters of Khaine reward every ounce of effort. Every brushstroke feels like part of the ritual. Every finished unit, another offering to the goddess of shadow and blood. If I've ever painted a Daughters of Khaine army, I'd lean into the darker Olgu-inspired theme. Muted silvers, violet shadows, and a subtle glow in the eyes and weapons. Something that feels more like a shrine lit by candlelight than a parade of gold and scarlet. I'd want them to look like they're stepping out of the mist before the sacrifice begins. Calm, composed, and terrifyingly serene. On the battlefield, the Daughters of Khaine play out exactly how they read in the lore. Fast and graceful and utterly ruthless. They don't lumber forward and rely on heavy armor. Instead, they flow across the board like a tide of ritual fury. Each movement deliberate, each strike purposeful. Their strengths lie in coordination, in timing, and in overwhelming with precision. In 4th edition rule set, Daughters of Khaine are a synergy-driven army built around buff layering, mobility, and control. Their units individually may seem fragile, but together they form a cohesive war machine that rewards players who plan several turns ahead. The defining mechanic of their army, and the beating heart of their playstyle, is Blood Rites. This ability grants escalating bonuses to the entire army as the battle progresses. Round 1, reroll 1s to the run, and they start with Swift and Ready. Round 2, reroll 1s to the charge, the tempo builds. Round 3, reroll 1s to the hit, the slaughters begin. Round 4, reroll 1s to the wound, the frenzy peaks. And round 5, a 5-up ward save, faithful becomes armor. These rites represent the army's growing momentum. The longer the battle goes on, the more unstoppable they become. Veteran players build their list and tactics entirely around synchronizing these bonuses with their unit positioning and combat rhythm. Daughters of Khaine win not by brute force, but through tempo control, deciding when and where the blood flows. Their games are often about trading units efficiently, denying enemy control, and timing their big pushes with the blood rites hit critical mass. The army's fragility means mistakes are costly, but when executed properly, they can dismantle even the toughest opponents through sheer volume of attacks and movement precision. Their mobility allows them to reposition quickly. Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, and Keenerai all excel in objective grabbing or force engagement. Meanwhile, heroes like the Hag Queens or the Blood-Rack Medusas anchor the army, granting prayers and auras that elevate your troops from frenzied fanatics to divine instruments of death. Another key trait to the Daughters of Khaine is their once-per-battle ability called All-Out Slaughter. This ability allows them to spend 1 CP and pick a friendly Daughters of Khaine infantry unit that is in combat to use this ability. That unit can use 2 fight abilities in this phase. That allows for critical moments and big fights to have a huge damage output. Some key war scrolls and units would definitely be Morathi-Khaine and the Shadow Queen, the faction's defining duo. Morathi's split form allow her to act as both a support hero and a combat monster at the same time. Morathi-Khaine leads the army casting prayers and issuing commands and empowering nearby units with divine fury, while the Shadow Queen is your heavy hitter, capable of tanking high damage units due to her only 3 wounds per phase mechanic, making her nearly unkillable without careful focus fire. Together, they define the Daughter's battlefield presence. strategy and slaughter united in one twisted soul. Then you have the Hag Queens and Slaughter Queens. These are your army's heart and engine. Their prayers fuel your tempo, from blessing witch elves with extra attacks and granting ward save rolls on rerolls. They're glass cannons and robes, but left unchecked, they'll supercharge your entire army's offensive power. After that, we have the Witch Elves and the Sisters of Slaughter. These are the battle line core of your army. Fast, fearless, and ferocious. Witch Elves excel at pure offensive output, while Sisters of Slaughter trade a bit of fat for flexibility and survivability. Both thrive when stacked with buffs, often turning a single combat phase into a whirlwind of mortal wounds and bloodshed. After that, you have Blood Sisters and Blood Stalkers. The Melissa units bring both elegance and lethality. Blood Sisters are elite melee fighters with crystal touch ability, turning their enemy's flesh to stone on a good roll, while Bloodstalkers dominate ranged play for Daughters of Khaine, unleashing lethal volleys that scale with the blood rights at table. They embody control, whichever flank they're on, the opponent must respect their threat. After that, we have the Keenerai Life Takers and the Heartrenders. Your strike from the shadow units. They descend from the skies to claim objectives or assassinate vulnerable heroes. Their movement tricks let them redeploy after striking, keeping them alive longer than their fragile stats might suggest. They give the Daughters of Khaine true board control. After that, you have your Cauldron of Blood and Avatars of Khaine, the spiritual centerpiece of the army, both narratively and tactically. It enhances your army's prayers, grants key buffs like ward saves, and provides a formidable melee anchor. The Avatar of Khaine atop it can awaken mid-battle to become a devastating combat piece in its own right. Next, we have the Doomfire Warlocks, the few male warriors in the entire faction. Swift cavalry who wield both blades and magic. They're your flexible support units, capable of casting, harassing, and darting across the battlefield to snatch control points. Some strengths they have is speed and mobility. They decide where the fights happens. Powerful stacking buffs and prayers. Lethal blood rights hit hard mid-game. Excellent board control through aggression, and one of the most rewarding armies for skillful players. Some weaknesses they have are they're fragile, mistakes are punishing. They're relying on hero auras and positioning. Vulnerable to mortal wound spam and high rend shooting, and they struggle if their tempo breaks early. Playing the Daughters of Khaine is a lot like conducting a ritual. The tempo builds with every turn until the final crescendo of blades screams, and every decision matters. Which unit you sacrifice, which hero you protect, when you unleash your fury. When executed well, your opponents don't even realize the trap is closed. They're already bleeding out on your altar. When we look back at the events of Broken Realms Morathi, it's easy to see why that book marked a turning point for the Mortal Realms. It wasn't just another campaign. It was the moment that one of Sigmar's oldest allies shattered the balance of order from the inside. Morathi didn't just seize power, she rewrote the rules of godhood. Once she was a manipulative sorceress of Olgu, a survivor of the world that was, who learned that charm and deception were often stronger than steel. In the Mortal Realms, she used those same talents to position herself as a devoted servant of Sigmar, playing the part of a loyal ally while secretly plotting her ascension. Through guile and bloodshed, she captured the city of Anvilgard, twisted it into Harkonnen, and descended in a ritual that merged her two forms, Morathi-Khaine, the Goddess Queen, and the Shadow Queen, the monstrous echo of her ambition. Her apotheosis changed more than just her followers. It fractured the pantheon of order. Sigmar's trust in his allies has never fully recovered. Teclis, ever the idealist, sees her as even a cautionary tale, a reminder that the Elven pantheon is built on fragile alliances. Even her son Malarian keeps his distance, watching from the darkness of Olgu with equal parts resentment and admiration. Yet, for the Daughters of Khaine, her rise is gospel. They see her as proof that devotion and blood can conquer destiny itself. Temples across the realms ring with hymns of Khaine, though many now whisper that their god's voice has gone silent, replaced by Morathi's own. To them, that silence is divine approval. Her influence stretches beyond her cults. Cities once loyal to Sigmar have fallen under her sway. Trade routes hum with shadowy missionaries and spies from Harkonnen, spreading her faith under the guise of aid. Even the Aiden Thiefkin, long isolated from the surface politics, maintain an uneasy pact with her. tied together by shared bloodlines and the ancient secrets of the Aelves. But Morathi's greatest legacy might be what she represents thematically. The idea that ambition unchecked becomes its own religion. She took what she believed the gods owed her and demanded no one's permission. She's a villain to some, a heroine to others, and to most, a necessary evil. Her story blurs the line between salvation and damnation, much like the shadow magic she wields. And now, as the realms adjust to the wake that she's left behind, we have to ask ourselves, what's next? Will she build an empire of temples and blood that rivals Azir itself? Or will her deceit finally catch up to her? If the mortal realms have taught us anything, it's that every god eventually faces the consequences of their own worship. For me, Morathi's Rise is one of the most fascinating arcs in all of Age of Sigmar. It's one of the perfect examples of how far the mortal realms have come since the early days. Stories aren't just black and white anymore. The Daughters of Khaine blur that moral line, proving that in a world of endless war, power and faith are often the same thing. And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive into the Daughters of Khaine. From the blood-soaked altars of Harkonnen to the fast-paced precision of their armies on the tabletop, we've talked about how Morathi's Rise reshaped the mortal realms, what makes her followers so distinct to the hobby and gameplay, and why their story remains one of the most defining in all the Age of Sigmar. What I love about how this faction is how they complete how it feels. The lore, the models, the rules, all feed into each other perfectly. Every army tells a story, but few are as unapologetically themselves as the Daughters of Khaine. Whether you're drawn to their elegance, their ferocity, or just the lore that one of the most cunning gods in the realms, there's something powerful about painting and playing an army that lives and dies by devotion. As always, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been tuning in and supporting the show. Every listen, every message, every new hobby story shared in the community keeps this podcast going strong. The Warhammer community thrives because of the people in it. Builders, painters, players, storytellers, and I'm grateful to be part of all of that with you. If you want to talk more about Daughters of Khaine, show off your painted armies, or theory craft some new lists, you could find me at Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast, YouTube at Rolling Recklessly, and of course, you can join our Discord where the real conversations happen. Until next time, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.